Good afternoon, Robin. Thank you for joining us here at Beyond the Glades podcast. We're more than excited to have you here to tell us a little bit about the Sotoxa and what it does and how it can be used in tribal communities to better programs, to help tribal courts and treatment facilities within the tribal government to help their community, to help their community members. How does the Sotoxa play out in outside government that can be applied here to better the community?
Yeah, so what you all are doing here is very exciting. Been able to be here with you all for the last couple of days. Always very inviting. The chief's been great, and it's been very welcoming from the community to help bring this resource to the tribal courts to be able to look at incidents of drug-impaired driving without the need to involve a blood draw. So we've been able to do breath alcohol screening for over 80 years for alcohol-impaired driving, and we've always been looking for a resource, a way to be able to check or screen for drug-impaired driving or recent drug consumption before someone is driving. And now we have the ability to do that with oral fluid. So we can do that at the roadside. And in about 5 minutes, the officer can have that information to see if the impairment that they are seeing is coming from recent drug consumption.
And how is oral fluid different from what's in place or was in place or has been used for X amount of years prior? How does that differ? How does that make it easier for officers or clinical staff to use?
Yeah, so the first piece part of it is you can take it and you can put it in the palm of your hand. So you have the ability to be doing roadside screening at the roadside without a lot of cumbersome material and a lot of cumbersome items. So you're able to take a swab collection. It takes about 30 to 45 seconds to collect enough oral fluid, and then they're able to use the cartridge, which does the testing, and then insert the collector, and then they're able to get a result for the 5 different drug classes, and then in totality we have an actual total of 6. So
can you elaborate on those 6? What exactly are the 6?
Yeah, so as we said, we've been doing breath alcohol testing for almost 80 years. And now the Sotoxa, which is manufactured by Abbott, and then work with them at Intoximeters. It tests for cocaine, amphetamines, methamphetamines, benzodiazepines, natural opiates, and then cannabis.
Oh wow! Okay, so is there any future additions to those 6, or is that the baseline that's going to continue here on out?
Common question that we get from time to time. Obviously, there's a buzzword that is affecting communities, not only tribal communities, but all across the country with fentanyl. And we see that more and more in combination with the other 6 drug classes that we regularly screen for now. We have some great programs in North Dakota and in Kansas where they've actually looked at their Sotoxa results and then see how often they see fentanyl by itself. And it's not very often, but they are seeing fentanyl more and more in combination with those other 6 drug classes that are there. So it's a requested thing that we are well in the process of working on. I can't give you any timeline. I know that's what you want to hear.
Everybody wants to know.
Yeah, you absolutely want to hear the okay when. And I don't have that for you yet. But I can tell you that it has definitely been heard for a need as we're working together with everyone for safer roads. Whether that's the driver themselves, whether that's the family that's with them in the vehicle, or whether it's the other drivers on the road, trying to increase that ability to live life to the fullest.
Absolutely. Now, I could see the multiple applications as far as in a clinical setting, in a therapeutic setting, as well as in a law enforcement setting. So you were saying Montana and Kansas. Do they have a pilot program for just law enforcement? Do they have a combination? Is there anything that Have they worked with tribal communities before?
Yeah, so we have a couple other tribal communities that we work with that are doing programs and using screening. What is so unique and hopefully to become a model for other tribal communities here coming from Miccosukee is providing that information into the tribal courts. So that way there is an ability to, once we've identified impairment, whether it would be urine or blood for the traditional testing techniques that might be there, we can screen roadside to further assert that we need to go to that level, that we can determine that there's been recent use of drugs, connecting that impairment that we're seeing. Obviously, the folks on the podcast don't know us as well as we know each other,
Right.
But we've worked together for well over a year now, so you know a little bit about my background and being a paramedic for over 20 years.
Yeah, you bring a lot to the table from every arena, law enforcement, EMT. I mean, you've done it all, and which is wonderful because then you've bundled it all into doing what you do now, which helps those of us that have never been in this arena to understand how many uses, what the benefits are, how foolproof it is. Because I mean, you can't mess it up. It's goof proof.
Right.
You know, everything that you need is there.
Right.
You guys have thought of everything to put into the machine to make sure that whatever application it's used for, it's easy to understand. It's you have the instructions, the machine walks you through it. You have a printout that you can then take to wherever it needs to go to validate either what you're looking for or, you know, as a confirmation of what you already have in place.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit more about the functions.
Yeah, so the technology that we use for oral fluid screening is really not new. We've been using lateral flow technology, and most people became regularly familiar with it during COVID. So if you took an at-home COVID test, you collected an oral fluid sample, and then you allowed that test to develop. And if the antibodies were there, then that was detected on that flow technology as it crossed the barriers. And if it was there, then it said, hey, then it's positive.
Yeah.
And if it's not there, then it continued to pass, and then the test was negative. So we're doing the exact same thing with oral fluids to look for drugs. So instead of looking for COVID antibodies, we are looking for those active drugs. So with cannabis being an example, people talk about it because it's been for years. Everybody says, oh, it hangs around forever. It shows up better and longer and longer. Well, when you're looking for metabolites, that's true. When you're looking for the active THC from cannabis, largely you're seeing the majority of that eliminated in the first 90 minutes. So when we're screening an oral fluid, we're only looking for that active metabolite to show recent drug consumption. Same thing with cocaine, same thing with amphetamine, methamphetamines. We're looking for those parent drugs or that active drug, not those that are metabolized out and then continue to be eliminated by the body for several days later. So
it's like a 24-hour window?
Exactly. So oral fluid provides the closest window of detection. So that way, when we're not detecting it in oral fluid, it most recently has not been in that recent period correlating to that impairment. So we were talking about paramedic. I know what the symptoms of a diabetic look like very, very well over the years. But I still would then run a glucose test to see what their glucose level is to confirm my suspicions of their impairment being from low blood sugar to be able to
because
take
the
next
symptoms
steps.
mimic the same as a drug.
Exactly. So the same thing happens here. The officers are trained to detect impairment, and then they can use this screening tool to be able to corroborate or affirm their opinion of the impairment to be coming from recent drug use, and then take those next actions. Because as the world turns every day, but it continues to turn more and more, and it's not commonplace to just be alcohol anymore. So many impaired driving incidents that we're seeing are alcohol and other drugs. And when it comes to a treatment perspective, if we only are looking to treat the alcohol addiction or the alcohol properties, in that plan, then we're not properly
Yeah, the other falls
providing
through the
services.
cracks, and you're not treating the whole problem, you're just treating the surface. Because most of the time, there's a comorbidity, because people use alcohol or let's go alcohol. People use alcohol, and when that no longer has the same effect, they turn to something else to give them the same buzz they were getting in the beginning when they started drinking. So most of the time, you hardly ever find just the alcohol. There's always that cofactor. So this helps with finding that cofactor to get the person the treatment that they need and hopefully heal, or not heal, because the person with addiction is never truly healed. It's a maintenance. It's something they live with consciously every day and have to make that choice. But this is a step in the right direction to help them get what they need.
Exactly. It's finding all of those areas of causation and those pressure points to be able to prevent a reoccurrence of injury, reoccurrence of danger from impaired driving, and provide all of those monitoring aspects that go along with that without being invasive of a blood draw or so personal as to a urine collection. So an oral fluid collection done in 30 seconds, and then 5 minutes later you have those results that are displayed screen side. So the test administrator or the officer is not interpreting whether that result is positive or negative.
Right, because you've eliminated the human error aspect of it.
Exactly.
So now, how does this tie into, for tribal communities, how does that respect the whole sovereignty? Because for tribes, the sovereignty is the greatest thing that they have. They how can I even, it's such an impact and it's such a right that they have that it has to be safeguarded above all else. So how does Sotoxa fall into being able to provide that? How can they still adhere to the sovereignty rights of the nation and still use the Sotoxa?
Yeah, so when we're using Sotoxa, it's a one-time test, and once the test is completed, there's nothing retained in the instrument of that sample. It's immediately disposed of. It's not sent anywhere else.
So no genetic material is recorded or saved in the device?
Absolutely correct.
Okay. And as far as information, it's not shared. It doesn't, like go up to the cloud or share any kind of transmitting.
Correct. Yep. There's not a centralized database that information is uploaded to or stored in for analytics from any other person's interest or needs. The information from the results of that test are stored on the instrument themselves. They can be printed for those court purposes, but that's the whole piece of the process that all goes together, and really being observant and acknowledging the ability to be less invasive by not having to do a blood draw. And if that is the absolute need, then we've provided the absolute most information to show that that's necessary.
Awesome. Now, how does that actually work? How does it have to have a calibration? Does it have to, be maintained on a daily basis, or is it just kind of like a plug and play?
Yeah, so the instrument itself comes with quality control cartridges, and they can be ran over and over and over again. So what this is checking each time you do this is to make sure that the reader inside of the analyzer is properly tuned to be able to interpret those results. Because we talked about the officer doesn't determine whether it's positive or negative. The reader interprets that and gives the officer the positive or negative result. So here it's looking to make sure that it can properly make that interpretation. Sometimes with our wildlife officers or our canine officers that are using this in the field, they'll get a little bit of hair or debris on these cartridges, and sometimes they'll get an error. But most commonly, just make sure that they're clean of any debris, and then they don't have any challenges. So you can run that QC test before every test, before and after every test. They're completely reusable, so that way you can say you've done a QC check.
Every time?
Every time. Yep.
Now, you said that you could do it either before every test or every so often. is that something that you got to program ahead of time, or is that something that the machine does itself?
So you can set the instrument to have a predetermined time that every test, it will ask you to do a QC test every day, every week, every 2 weeks. But you can run a QC test whenever you need to or whenever you want to. So if it's within that time period where it is not required for a QC, but it's your shift and you have the instrument and you want to run a QC at the beginning of your shift, you can do that.
That's great.
So it's a two-piece collection system is what makes this unique, and it comes packaged just as this. And it's a robust Q-tip is what the collection piece is. So there's no poking, there's no prodding of any of those pieces, and this is where I start to tell my age, as we've talked about. As I come from that area where we had push pops.
Yeah, the toilet paper ice cream.
Yes. So I say you just kind of push the collector up, and then you have the donor will take the swab, and then they'll do the collection themselves. So the officer is not doing the poking and the pushing. The other person is doing the collection, and then it turns blue right above that black gasket there. So we train the officers that if it's blue, then it'll do, and if it's not blue, then it won't do. So from a officer use standpoint, very simple, because if the blue is not there, then there's not enough oral fluid collected, and they need to continue that collection piece. And then once that's done, they will insert the collector into the cartridge that's already in the instrument, have a little countdown timer, and then 5 minutes later, they'll be able to have those results.
Now, is there any way that someone can over-collect a sample and dilute it, like to where when you stick it in, it won't read?
Nope.
No, so you can't collect too much of a sample.
Nope. So once it's absorbed all that it can absorb to be able to run that test.
So then that goes into the machine by itself, or you said there's a cartridge?
Yeah, so our cartridge comes separately, and this is where all of the testing material takes place in. So when we talked about this being disposed of when it's complete and there's no retention of anything for any genetic mapping or any pieces like that, it's all on the cartridge itself. So the cartridges, they only go in one way. You can't put it in upside down, you can't put it in sideways. And then when you put the cartridge in, then it will check that for expiration. And then when it's ready to be able to collect the sample, then you would insert that into the collector, and then it will immediately start the test.
Oh.
And
now,
then,
does it need to be in a specific location? Can the officer hold it? Can we hang it up, like, let's say in the back of the car? You know how like the gun racks, you kind of like put them in the back? Is that something that can be done, or does it need to have a special technique for it?
Yeah, so it needs to stay somewhat level because it's lateral flow technology, but it has a level detector in the instrument. So if it's not level like it needs to be, then it'll give you a warning that says that you need to level it out. It does the timing of the test. So you can't read it too soon, you can't read it too long. It reads the test when it's supposed to be done, and then it also maintains the temperature inside the instrument. So here, not necessarily overly worried about the cold, but in some of our northern communities, up in North Dakota, it gets really a little cooler. So it does have an onboard heater in there to make sure that the test is administered at the proper temperature, and then to be able to provide those results, because as you all have here in Miccosukee, the transport time to medical care is extensive.
Yes.
The transport time, if you're going to have to move something off to the county, you want to know that you're needing to make that arrest and support that process for that time to be involved in that.
Now, I see that it walks you through everything. I mean, you really can't mess this up. Can they program in there like identifiers, like car type, just specifics to the particular person that we're testing? Or is that something that's just a generic with no identifiers that we can trace back?
Yeah, so there are some questionnaires that can be answered in there, such as age, gender, reason for the stop. So if it was a traffic stop, or if it was a checkpoint type stop in jurisdictions where they can do that, then you can kind of track those portions of information. But it doesn't record any personal identifying information, so no name, date of birth, or other pieces that can be tracked backwards.
Now, if we wanted to pull that information to use in court, how can we identify, other than with date and time, that is the particular testing that we need?
Yeah, so it's date and time stamped. Each cartridge is serialized and it's date coded, so there's no way for it to be any other test than what
that
was
particular
performed that
one.
event. Yeah, and then what we also have is the ability to print those results, so they can be provided for court purposes. They can be printed back at any point later in time. So I'm going to plug this in here, and I'm going to print real quickly from one of our demonstrations earlier, and then we able to print the results. You saw the printer get started there, and then it would be able to push all those results out, and then you have a printed copy that can either be scanned or stored or sent to the courts.
That's fantastic. So you guys have thought of everything. I mean, it's everything is included. There's no possibility of human error because it's walking you through it. You have the safeguards on the cartridges for testing and to show if they're expired. So it's not like a person can accidentally use an expired test and mess up the results. I mean, there's literally a check and balance for every part of this device.
Absolutely. And it change is hard.
It is.
New technology can somewhat be challenging
And scary.
And scary.
Because we don't know how to use it. What if we mess up? That's always the question. What if we mess it up?
Yeah. So you're right. The processes are on the step-by-step process on the screen to be able to run the tests. And as long as you follow the rule, it must be blue or it will not do, then you're set up for success to be able to run a screen and capture that information to help officers make good decisions at the right time in the right way. And that's really what this is about.
Now, if you had the opportunity to talk to other tribal governments, what would you tell them?
The biggest piece about it is it's not invasive, so we're not using needles. We're not doing blood collection. We're not drawing blood from any persons to be able to do that. And it gives you that extra piece of information when it's not alcohol that you're seeing, but there's another impairing substance that there is on board. Our most common combinations that we see right now are cannabis and methamphetamine. We see those in combination quite a bit. And definitely if you introduce alcohol at all into that combination, then the impairment opportunity obviously increases.
It's a trifecta.
Yes, and the chances to be involved in a serious crash or someone to be injured or even killed, those options definitely go up.
Wow, this is truly amazing. And we're so fortunate to be able to first have met you and for you to open the way for us to have the Sotoxa here on the reservation and to put it to use. Hopefully once the process gets started, it opens the door for other tribes as well to see what Miccosukee has done with it and how it can be implemented on other reservations to help the community be the best it can be.
Yeah, and the end of that is to be able to have the best opportunity for outcomes.
Absolutely.
Living life to the fullest. And when we can have the right information from an incident to be able to provide the best outcome to not have a future incident, then that's a win-win and a better opportunity for outcome for everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time and for your input and your energy in helping us get this off the ground. You are a godsend to us and to all those.
Hold on, we lost the image for a good 2 minutes.
Oops.
So from, God, what were you guys saying? From just kind of the last tangent you went on before you started saying thank you and this and that. You were talking about how it's not invasive.
Okay, so what would you say to tribal communities?
Yes.
Okay.
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 Yeah.
All right.
So Rob, if you could have the opportunity to speak to other tribal communities, what would you tell them about the Sotoxa?
First of all, is to talk to those that are using it in tribal communities, which is here in Miccosukee, and there are some others across the country, but not those that have gone to the point of being able to use that with tribal courts. Miccosukee is the one that's really taking that step forward to be able to use that information piece without being invasive with blood draws and blood collections. And then it's about empowering everybody to have the right decision, to have the right information to make the right decision at the right time, and to do it in the right way. And that right decision is ultimately to prevent someone from being injured or killed. And then to be able to have that information then further to support appropriate treatment to prevent a reoccurrence or another opportunity for a serious injury or a crash to be involved. That's really what it's about. And
It's a win for everybody.
it is. And, we talked earlier today about a cliche of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And while it's a saying, it couldn't be any more true here. As the transport times to appropriate medical care from here on the reservation are lengthy. So prevention is really important about preventing those crashes and those serious injuries from happening.
That's absolutely right. Thank you so much for your time, for your input, for your energy, for everything that you've done to help get Miccosukee with Sotoxa and every benefit that that brings to the table. Thank you so much for that. If you all liked today's content, please like and share and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.